My name is Paul Bellini. I'm 53 years old. I'm a comedy writer primarily. I live in Toronto. Most people know me for my work on Kids in the Hall, which of course made me famous as the towel guy. I used to walk around wearing a towel on the show. So if you're familiar with the show, you would recognize that. But I've also worked on other television shows, mostly in comedy. I'm overweight and I wish I could do something about it, but other than that, I lead a pretty good life.
I keep hearing about the towel guy, some nonsense with a towel guy. You tell me about this. What is this towel guy?
Well, how that happened was I was hired as a writer on Kids in the Hall, and I was working on a skit with Mark McKinney, and it wasn't really going that well. We were at his house, so we just started talking about other things. And I had just been to a bathhouse for the very first time. It was a gay bathhouse called the Romans on Bay Street. It's no longer there. They tore it down. And I told Mark how I walked around down these long corridors looking in different rooms wearing only a towel. And he thought this was the funniest thing he had ever heard in his life. I'm not sure why. Anyway, a few weeks later we were talking about a contest, having a contest on the show. And we were trying to come up with prizes to send a prize winner. And Mark said, I think the prize should be Bellini in a towel. Everybody laughed. And the next thing I knew, I'm standing in a public park wearing a towel, getting photographed as part of a prize package. And I did the towel guy basically for the next 4 years. And people still stop and ask me about it all the time. And, you know, could you do the towel guy? And where's your towel? And all that kind of nonsense. So it's been something. Well, that was just another part of the contest. What it was you got to, what you won essentially was that I would show up at your home and you could poke my belly with a finger or a wooden implement or something like that. So the whole contest was called the Touch Bellini contest. As a result, I got touched a lot. Not inappropriately.
You grew up in Timmins, right? Timmins? Tell me about Timmins.
Well, you know, most people know I grew up in Timmins. I was born and raised there. Timmins, of course, is a small mining town about 400 miles north of Toronto. And I was the most famous non-hockey playing person from Timmins for several years until this woman named Shania Twain came along and recorded some record that sold about 30 million copies. And the next thing you know, I'm sort of relegated to the back pages of the newspaper and it's all about Shania. I think it's great that a huge music superstar or any kind of superstar came from Timmins. I mean, Timmins is a very small place. It's rather remote. It's a gold mining town. It's only about 40,000 people. It's not very large. So I'm just happy to be able to contribute my own way towards Timmins' renown.
Maybe they should have a museum for Paul Bellini and his towel in Timmins, huh?
Well, I don't know what you would put in a Paul Bellini museum other than all the junk that's already in my bedroom. I don't know. I think that's very interesting. The thing with the Shania Twain Museum is she had all these glitzy costumes and guitars. I don't have anything like that. So I think instead of a museum, it would be better to have a Paul Bellini restaurant that would serve all the food that I like, which is mostly like sushi and Italian food. And maybe even serve Bellinis, which are, of course, alcoholic beverages. They're cocktails made up of, I think, peach schnapps or peach juice and champagne. I don't know. I've never had one. Actually, I did once. I did have a Bellini once, and I didn't like it. So should I be admitting that? Maybe not.
Do you have a personal life? Details, please.
I'm gay. I have always been gay. I came out just when I started working on Kids in the Hall because all of a sudden I found myself in a situation where Scott Thompson and I were writing gay characters and gay comedy for a national television show, actually international. We were in the States at the time too. And I didn't want my parents to find out about it by reading it in a newspaper. So I told them. They were fine with the idea. I think my mother already knew. My father was a little upset, but he got over it. Since then, I've had 3 boyfriends. I'm on my 3rd boyfriend, a wonderful guy named George, who's also from Timmins, incidentally. Timmins boy like myself. So we live with our cat in downtown Toronto. All that's pretty good, I have to say.
My producer wants me to ask you if you have any upcoming projects, whatever.
I always have a million upcoming projects. In the past, I've recorded CDs of original music with musicians that were really not successful, but I wanted to do them. I've written independent films, feature films with friends who made them and stuff like that. Lately, I've been making experimental films on my own. I have a new partner for my experimental film projects. Like I said, I perform regularly at a place called the Flying Beaver, which is a lesbian bar, and I'm the host. I host comedy evenings. I also work with a talent contest called Spectra, where I'm a judge. I'm also the chairman of the board, and we're currently co-writing a Christmas song for our contestants to sing. I do a lot of things. I don't dance or write poetry, but pretty much everything else.
You know what I love? I love a good movie. Do you like movies? Do you have a favorite movie?
Well, I'm a genuine movie buff, and that's almost a tough question to answer because I watch everything. I watch Turner Classic Movies all the time. I love movies from the early 30s, the pre-code era. I love silent films. I love films from every country on earth. I've seen as many of the great films as possible. I follow all the great directors, the old dead ones and the new ones. If I have a favorite, I really like Carl Dreyer movies. He made a movie in 1932 called Vampire or Vampire, which I think is a perfect movie. I also love L'Avventura, the Antonioni movie. I love movies. I've seen every Oscar-nominated film for the last 4 or 5 years because in order to enjoy the Oscars, it's good to know who the players are, right? So, movies, just throw a name at me. I'm sure I've seen it.
Death in Venice?
You know, Death in Venice is by one of my favorite directors, who's Luchino Visconti. And it's one of my least favorite of his films. He made a film called Senzo about a noblewoman who falls in love with an Austrian soldier. She's Italian, he's Austrian. It's during the occupation. She gives up everything for him. So she's so crazy in love for him. And then turns out he's cheating on her, so she has him executed. That, to me, is a great movie. But Death in Venice I always found a little boring, a little ponderous, and I think also suffers from that mid-60s habit of using zooms. I hated the zoom lens. I have seen it recently, about 2 years ago. I still find it boring. And I love Dirk Bogarde, so I wish it was a little faster.
Joe D'Alessandro.
Well, Joe D'Alessandro I hardly think of as an actor, although he did have a legitimate career after he finished doing the Paul Morrissey stuff. Not a big one. He was obviously a great-looking guy, and I like the fact that he popularized the notion of the hustler in that sort of 70s experimental film. He's sexy.